Hi, hello. Welcome to the Blue Lotus podcast. I'm Mitara, your host, and welcome to episode 2 of the podcast. There's a little less momentum going on with me compared to the first one because I don't know why. I was pretty pumped with the first one, so it flowed abnormally too well. If you want to go listen to that, I recommend that. But we're going to do a bit more of a chill one this time. The thing with the podcast that I really wanted to do, and it's my intention to continue doing, is I think there's a lot of empty information in the world. I think sometimes we speak for the sake of speaking, me included, and we forget and don't give due credit to people's intelligence and how much we do actually know already as humans. With that little tidbit, let's jump into today's podcast, which is going to be a bit of a shorter one because I don't have much to say here, but I am going to focus on the feelings of underlying intrusive, negative, and undesirable emotions. Personally, for me, and I don't know how true this is for everyone, there's always a subconscious feeling of grief at all times that existed within me. And it's there in crowded rooms, it's there when I'm alone, it's there when I meditate. It takes different forms, so when I'm in a crowded room with people that I'm not completely comfortable with, but I'm enjoying myself, it takes the form of loneliness and that I don't fit in. And in a different place, I could be exhausted and I want to go home. It takes the feeling sometimes of bitterness and annoyed. And but when I'm meditating and when I'm in my room by myself, it takes the feeling of a void, and it takes the feeling of an emptiness within me, and I can feel it in my heart. I can focus on it and really feel it, and sometimes it feels like this feeling of someone's crushing and holding my heart in their hands and really crushing it. Or sometimes it feels like the inside of my chest is empty and it's kind of caving in because there's all this empty space and it's like a vacuum in there and my chest is caving in. That's the feeling I want to talk about today. The reason I want to talk about it is last night I had a really lovely vidarshana about guilt that I feel. I am someone who feels copious amounts of guilt and shame, and that is something I've always felt throughout my whole life, and I can trace it back to when I was a kid, and I feel it, but I think there's only so much we can trace back to our parents. I've used this imagery before in my own meditations, and I think I've mentioned it to like 2 or 3 other people, but it's like you're holding a dartboard with a red like bullseye in the middle. And as long as you're holding that, people can aim at it. And sometimes even if they're not meaning to aim at it and they're just throwing things, if it hits that red bullseye, it hurts. That's kind of how I describe these feelings of what make us us. For me, it's very easy for me to feel guilt. And I can feel it even if someone close to me doesn't plan on making me feel guilty or shame. And I've seen, now that I've looked at it throughout my whole life, I can see there are instances where it doesn't affect my parents in the way that I think it affects them, or it doesn't impact them in the way that I think it impacts them. And sometimes I'm shocked out of it because I realize that I view the world in this lens of guilt and shame, and I assume other people feel the amount that I feel. But I've noticed that that's not entirely the case. And I have someone very close to me who I really admire and I really look up to. Their discipline and their sense of self. And my path has never been that way. I've never been a disciplined person. I've had to learn those things. I've had to learn to place that sense of self on myself. But for me, I've always been carefree, and I've always been playful, and I've always been curious. And that has always, first and foremost, led my sense of discovery in life. And the point is, so this person is a very close person to me. And when I look at them, sometimes I feel guilt. Sometimes I feel like they judge me in places that, and I've asked them, I've confronted them, I've asked them, hey, do you judge me here? Do you judge my actions here? And they've said, no, I don't. I don't know why you keep saying this. And obviously, yeah, there is a percentage that they probably are lying, but I don't believe they are. And I'm gonna take their word for it, because there's no point living in that fear of paranoia. And if they are lying, well, well, that's kind of their problem, isn't it? But just that and this whole feeling of guilt is so big for me. And last night I started writing about it, and I started thinking about it, about how I don't look at it properly. I don't really give it the due acknowledgement that it deserves in my life, because it takes up a good chunk of my subconscious. It does. My thoughts go through a little screening sometimes when I have a thought in my head, and it goes through that screening of, do I feel guilty about this? Do I feel shame? Oh, is that a bitter thought? Or is that a shameful thought? Oh, do I not? I kind of don't believe in that thought. I go through like 10 thoughts and only one comes out. And in a good chunk of that, there is a feeling of guilt. And I felt it with my friends. I felt it everywhere. It's there. It's a persistent feeling in my life. Just to give you a little imagery here of where I am, because I kind of don't really want to show my face on this podcast. I think I'm more honest when I don't. I'm in a dark room by myself. The only light that I see in this room is from my laptop screen, and I can see it recording me, which is pretty fun. Also, hang on, I'm getting a call. I just got a call. A friend called. We're supposed to meet up soon, but I had this idea to shoot this episode, so that is what we're doing. Oh, isn't it lovely when you can hang out with friends and they make you laugh and life is kind of good? Yeah. But anyway, back to the real stuff. I'm still in this process of uncovering myself and uncovering the feelings that make me, me. But yesterday what I did realize is this feeling of guilt makes me, me. It's part of me. It's a big part of me, in fact. And I refuse to look at it. And I refuse to acknowledge its presence. The way I see negative and undesirable feelings is you need to kind of look at it like an unruly kid, because it sort of is, at its core, there's a lot of hurt and pain, but on the surface it's a lot of destruction. And you can't be soft with destruction. You have to kind of have a strict hand there. And discipline needs to come into place. Consequences need to come into place. But with that, there also needs to be a level of love and gentleness when handling those things, and awareness that, not to say this is for your own good, but to say that you can be as unruly and rude as you want, but the world will not stand for it, and no one's gonna just baby you through it, and there's consequences to it. So if you want to continue being that way, that's fine, but I acknowledge you as you are. But there's no place for it, and you're not required to be this way. That's me when I talk to my negative feelings, by the way. Reason I'm talking about this, reason I think a lot of people tell you to acknowledge these dark feelings and these deep feelings within yourself, when you start to acknowledge these very deep feelings of bitterness and jealousy and anger and all of those good stuff, the really grimy stuff, is that there is a part of you, probably half of you, that is comprised of these gritty emotions. And it's not pretty, and you probably don't want it to resurface that much. Oh, there we go. Hang on. Actually, I have something to talk about here. So I was looking at this guilt, right? And I was asking myself, why don't I want to look at this? Why don't I want to bring this to the surface? Because I'm not all that afraid of my emotions, but this was a pretty deep one for me. And what I kind of realized was, it's because, you know how the more you do something, you become that thing, right? You learn a craft enough, eventually people start recognizing you for that. Eventually you start identifying with that. And I think deep down on a fundamental level, we know that whatever we pour energy into, we become. And I think that deep down, we do not want to become these emotions. We don't want to bring it to light because we do not want to be identified with these emotions. And we don't want to, first of all, admit that we are part of these emotions. But also with that, if we admit, there is also the deeper fear of what if we become these emotions? What if they're bigger than us? What if they come out and they just get so unruly and so destructive and we're defined by these things? And you don't want to think about how deep these emotions go, because I think they can go pretty deep. And I'm being very honest, I think they can go pretty deep. And I think us as humans have the capacity to go very deep when it comes to even negative emotions. And that's a very scary thing. But like I said, I'm also figuring this out. And this is also sort of my journey of doing this. If anyone has any thoughts on this, please, I would love your comments and your reviews and your feedback. But also at the same time, I don't understand how this podcasting thing works and I don't understand its platforms and I'm so confused. So if I don't reply, that's probably why. But you can reach out to me on my IG, on this podcast's IG, which is the Blue Lotus Podcast. But I'm also gonna upload this on YouTube, so hopefully that'll be there soon. Anyways, pivoting back to the topic at hand. Anyways, like I said, that's kind of the reason that I don't want to bring these emotions to a surface, and I don't want to look at these emotions are genuinely because part of me believes that I am these things. From here on, I think it's really anyone's game, because how you tackle it from here on, I think depends on you and depends on your skills in life. Someone once told me to acknowledge my skills in life and notice what I'm good at. And at the start, it was super confusing why I needed to do that. But as I continued on my journey of self-discovery and spirituality and meditating, I realized, wow, she was right. She was so nail on the head, right? Nail on the head? Is that a saying? I don't know. Having skills is really what your own skills, what make you, are really what gets brought out and become your sort of weapons throughout this journey and become what you can use to tackle these things and uncover parts about yourself and figure things out. And yeah, it becomes very pivotal. That's a wonderful exercise to have, by the way, is find out what you're good at. Be proud of what you're good at. Notice these things, acknowledge these things, and bring them to the surface and bring them to the forefront, because gosh, does it help. I'm very serious. It helps a lot. There's a lot to ground yourself in when it comes to your own skills, because the skills that you have, I don't have. And that's just how it is. Just to sort of end this episode, the reason I'm kind of talking about this and the reason I'm bringing up this whole like negative emotions and why we hide them and bringing them to the surface is they govern a lot of our lives. We don't necessarily realize how much they really weigh on us and how much heaviness they actually occupy in our hearts. Because for me, it's guilt and shame. And since recently, I've been getting into the practice of admitting in my head when I feel guilt and shame. And then sometimes, honestly, since recently, I got into the practice of saying it out loud and asking people, hey, are you ashamed of me right now? And they say no, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's just in my head right now. And you observe these things and you observe these underlying emotions and you allow them to come to a surface. You acknowledge them in a way of, because it's really hard to be unbiased about these things. It's really hard to look at a negative emotion and feel, wow, I really love this emotion. For me, it is undesirable. That's just how it is. It's really hard to look at it without judgment, even though people tell you to. Sometimes it happens, but it's pretty hard on a day-to-day basis. And it's pretty hard when you find out that there's parts of you that you do not like, but do represent you. But if you can be brave and if you can bring these things to a surface and acknowledge these big, big emotions, sometimes little ones, you start realizing the inner workings of your subconscious are a whole web, and they're pretty connected to each other. Because personally, in my whole self-growth thing, I don't think I will ever be the kind of person that preaches you to get better at yourself. I don't think I will ever do that. What I will do, however, and what I have done with myself is, for me, the goal has always been to alleviate the pain I feel within. And that's it. That's it. You can keep your habits. You can not wake up at 5 in the morning. Don't let people tell you that you need to change to become a better version of you. You just need to become who you are. That's it. That's really it. Oh gosh, it's so simple. But who you really are isn't some sort of light being that's inside you that just needs to be uncovered. It's just you. It's just you right now. Sorry, that's so anticlimactic, but it is just you. And we don't acknowledge, within even this moment, we don't acknowledge a lot of feelings that are going on within us, and a lot of big emotions and painful emotions. We just refuse to acknowledge are us. But sort of when you look at the monster under the bed, you realize, hey, it's not really a monster. And just because we look at these things, they don't become us either. Yeah, a bit of a shorter episode this time, because I do have to cut it short. I have to leave now. I have to get dressed. These things that I say are so easy to say out loud and so easy to preach and not mean, and I'm sure you hear it from so many people in life, because I do. And I'm not saying I'm any different at all. This podcast could be absolute crap, but it helps me, and I hope it helps you to be yourself a bit more. Love yourself a bit more. And be gentle with yourself a bit more. Because it's a lot of consistent little acts that get us to the places that we want to go and become the versions of ourselves that we want to become. Listen, that's an illusion in itself, the whole become the version that you want to become. Oh, don't get me started. But that said, that is sort of the codes of life. That is the inner workings of life. We identify ourselves to something and move and work towards that thing. But in order for us to go in the right direction, we do have to pick something that is more wholesome and beneficial for us. But within that journey that you try to become a better version of you, I hope that as you're going through that process, you realize that that is never the end goal. And that end goal actually doesn't end there. It moves on to something else, and then something else, and then something else. And then you're never satisfied. The human experience. Anyways, I will leave this with you for now. Sort of leave this podcast open-ended, maybe with more questions than when you started out the episode. But I hope it makes your brain think. I hope it gives you inspiration. And yeah, bit of an interlude episode. I will see you next week. Yeah, love you guys. Bye.